It's okay.
Welcome to the Sedona Soul Sisters show, down-to-earth discussions on spirituality, metaphysics, paranormal, and healing topics. The Sedona Soul Sisters are the most trusted psychic mediums, healers, and galactic practitioners in Sedona, Arizona. We are Rozlyn Reynolds, who'll probably be popping in soon. Myself, Ivory LaNoue, my webcam just died, so I'm going to be incognito today. Terri Ann Russell, Robert Markham, Onya-Sophia and Michael. We have offices in Sedona, Arizona, where we see clients from all over the world. Today's topic is Orion, star race, and Starseed. So this is going to be an interesting one. Terri Ann, I'm going to let you start. Let's start with like a little bit about the Orions in general, like where they're from.
Okay. Yeah, the Orion, I've always had a fascination with the Orion constellation. I don't know why. I think it was one of the easiest constellations to learn in school with Orion's belt. But Orion's constellation consists of 4 stars. There's Regal, Betelgeuse, Bellatrix, and I think it's Safe. But the 3 stars in the belt in the middle, so Orion is consisted of, the Orion's belt is those 3 stars. And it sort of forms, I believe, a rectangle in the sky. But if you look specifically for those 3 stars, that's how you know that it's Orion's belt. So that's what I've always looked for. And so Orion, what I like about Orion is they have a lot of similar things to Earth. So when I look at somebody, so what I do when I look at star seeds and I do my galactic soul journeys and stuff like that, I look at their time of birth and where they were born. And sometimes you can tell from that if there's specific degrees in their chart, whatever it's in. So say Orion, it would be in Gemini. If those degrees are aligned at that time of their birth, it's more than likely that they are an Orion starseed. If I don't have that information, we always tune in and we see which aligns with that person the most. So that's one of the easiest ways for me to do it. And then I always confirm with their higher self too. But so Orion consists, I found this very interesting when I did some research about Orion. Positive and negative races that live on Orion together. So humans, grays, reptilians, they coexist. But similar to how it is on Earth, there's a lot of control going on in that atmosphere. So originally, the Orions left from Orion to come to Earth to flee that type of environment.
One thing I find interesting, like, do you remember the cantina scene? And I think it's in Star Wars movies where they show the cantina scene and there's all this wildly different races. And I've heard that the Orions can be compared to that because there's such a big star system. And so there's this great diversity of the species. So when you say, what do Orions look like? It's not possible to say they look like this, you know. And again, we've talked about this before, like here on Earth, look at the diversity we have here. But the one thing we do have is that we all are humanoid. I'm not even sure that they're all humanoid from Orion because it is such a diversity, but apparently they're really known for that. And I like you were talking about the different races, like those clusters include the Orions, the Greys, and then I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right, but Mentakans.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Greys are not a light bringing race, you know, they're like reptilians. But I always thought that the beings from Orion were like reptilians. And so when one night this being came to me, and it was really beautiful and it had amazing energy, but I said, who are you? And it said Orion. It didn't pronounce it Orion. It said Orion. And I freaked out because I thought it was just something dark, like presenting itself as a being of light. But then I found out later that they are not all dark from that planet. So I invited it back. It hasn't come back yet. I feel kind of bad about that, but there's one of those things, you know, you just don't know. But apparently these reptilian beings like the Greys really dominated those original Orions and put constraints on them. And that's why the Orions wanted to leave their home constellation.
Yes.
So it leads to them an incarnation cycle where it manifests them into entering Earth's incarnation cycle. But they didn't escape that subconscious trauma they left behind from the grays subjugating them. And so a lot of Orions, I guess, reincarnate on Earth with trust issues and difficulty to express how they truly feel. And it's interesting, like we always talk about past lives things. Boy, that's a real past life thing there that people may just have no idea about.
Yeah. And so, like, if I see somebody, a telltale for me a lot of times with an Orion is they have these activated memories, and they're really here, they're activists, they want to uncover these dark agendas that are going on planet Earth, so they have a real resonance within them, really, to, like, we've talked about other star seeds and how, like, some of them are for the underdog and other ones are really about the environment, and so each of us has our own I guess interest that we have in it. And so when you look at the Orions, those activists, they're really here to uncover what that darkness is here, because they have those memories. And I think now, the time we're in, it's so amazing that everything is so activated and open that people are really starting to catch interest, right? They're getting thoughts or things that come in and, like, oh, what's that about? Like, if somebody watches this today and says, well, that resonates with me, I want to do some more research about what Orion is about. So it starts to activate what those memories are, and they'll start having dreams or have a past life regression, things like that. So I find that so fascinating.
I do too. And I did find a little bit of information about their appearance, and I did want to share it because I think people always ask me these questions when they hear these shows. They'll write and go, but what do they look like? So if I can find that, I'm always going to tell you. And apparently, like 11% of Orions are a Lyran stock, and so they're white. Most are light brown skin, but about 10% are Caucasian type with light hair. They look very similar to Earth humans, but where our bodies are water-based, theirs have an oily, fatty content that acts like a lubricant. So they say that the Orion humanoids, who have mostly vegan characteristics, have particularly striking eyes. And I can't find a description. There's a lot of different pictures, but they're all different. So I think striking eyes can be maybe an unusual, vivid color. Do you know anything about that, Terri Ann? Not to put you on the spot, but I'm just curious.
Yeah. So what I've seen is like an ice blue, like, it's very distinctive, and there's probably a lot of varieties out there, like our eyes. But this ice blue color, it's so distinctive, similar to, oh, what was that? The Anshar, they have those striking eyes. So they're like this just ice blue, like you can just look at it and know. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and it goes along with the lightness of their skin and the light hair. And so some of the humans, that's what they may look like. Again, we've talked about this before on other shows too. It's such a variety of things. You don't have to be everything to be just an Orion. Like, we're not everything in our zodiac, or we're not everything in our nationality. We get bits and pieces from everything that comes into us. So you may not have some of the things that Orions may have, or you may have some.
And we've talked about that too, how we are probably most likely starseed of several different places. And that's interesting. It makes sense to me because, again, like humans on Earth, if you look at your ancestral background, you are such a mix from different races, different countries. Why wouldn't it be this true when you've got a whole, multi-universes out there? Things are going to get mixed. We're just such infants into participating with this galactic community. Let's talk a little bit about what the Orion star race are like. And I think it equates to Starseed as well. Like, I know that I've heard this before, that they're kind of been nicknamed a cold starseed, but it's because they hide their emotions, but that doesn't mean they don't have emotions, right?
Right. When somebody is characterized as a cold person on Earth, a human, it's because they're holding back their emotions. They don't want others to know their emotions. So because the Orions have those trust issues we've talked about, Sometimes they can be standoffish or what one might consider to be cold, but they really have went through a lot. Again, similar to humans on Earth, there's many lessons and integrations that they learned. And so they've brought that through them when they've incarnated into a starseed. So a lot of them are very much freedom fighters. You know, they were really fighting for their freedom on Orion. There was a lot of destruction, a lot of war, again, with that control-based dark agenda. So it seems only natural that they would be freedom fighters, right?
Gosh, that sounds very similar to the headlines on the news today, doesn't it? Here on Earth. I mean, I really thought we were past all that on this planet, but clearly not. So I feel like deep down they're really like loving and caring and benevolent, but it's hard for them to open up to people. And I think that's really true of the starseed, to open up to people, but they can be very deep in their thoughts and emotions, but they can appear as being like logical or I don't want to say indifferent, but reserved would probably be a good way. Here's Miss Roz. Let's let her in. Yay, the party's growing.
Get this party started.
Yes. So what is the mission of Starseed, Orion Starseed? Because I read something about like a double mission. Are you aware of that?
So yeah, so again, going back to like the Mintakas and everything, we have double missions, we have all these things. So if you look at the lighter beings of Orion, they really look for the light in everybody. So normally they're attracted to their light. They want to help people. They're activists. They're really have an interest in Earth and humans and doing well and seeking that freedom. They're fighting for that freedom again. So yeah, some have double missions. So it really depends on you specifically when you came here and what you were brought here to do. Many of us have double missions.
I feel like everybody has double missions, and whether, you know, you could be starseed or just a light worker, that's not a just, but being a light worker or a starseed, one of your missions is to raise frequency and raise the frequency of those around you just by being who you are. So there's a mission there. But I know that they are really drawn to fields in like science, technology, and medicine, and just helping people align to their true source of power, their higher self. But then there's that personal mission because of their history with being subjugated and hurt by the grays, is that they just want to learn to open their hearts and learn to trust again and be open to the pleasure there is in a human experience. And there is a lot. That's a lesson for all of us. Like we can get so drawn so into our spiritual work, we forget to enjoy the human experience along with it. So I think Orion Starseed are just part of it, is they're supposed to know that joy and knowledge can coexist harmoniously.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they get stuck in their heads too, sort of like us, right? So if you're here and you think you're an Orion starseed, I would start doing some research for sure. But they love research and they love learning, like you said, very much into science and using that side of their brain. But again, that part of them is standoffish. So if you don't know why you have that, sometimes, you know, it can be from your childhood or it can be from a past life. It could be from a life on another planet. When I do past life regression, we look at all that. The soul has been so many places, lived so many lives in so many different atmospheres. And so all of that is carried through your soul. It's within here, like you know it. So when I take somebody through a regression and they go back to another planet, usually something within them awakens through that experience because they're like, wow, well, I didn't understand that, say, if I was a freedom fighter, you know, and I was always an activist and fighting for people. I didn't know where that came from because I never really had anything in my childhood about that. But as we do the past life regression and that comes through and you see that time that you lived in, your soul lived in as a Orion, say, you can then understand where that comes from and look at that deeper. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. Hello, Roz. We're so
Hi,
glad you're here.
Ivory. I don't know where you are though.
My camera died. You missed that part right before the show. My camera died and it will not revive. So I'll bring
Okay,
home the one
cool.
from the office, and tomorrow I shall be present in view again, but I shall be present in view again, but
I
I'm
just
here.
figured that my computer was doing its usual thing of, okay, well, let me see what mood I'm in today. Will I get on or will I not?
Today it's mine. It's my camera, just like, no, you're not going to be on camera today. I think
Oh,
there's going to be a lot of people watching this episode, as there always is, who are like, how do I know if I'm an Orion starseed? You know, they always want to know. It's really funny because I didn't know a whole lot about Orions, but as I researched like what the signs are, I think I am an Orion starseed. Like there's a lot on that list. I'm like, holy moly. But I
And
don't
that's
have
what I
any
always
problem
say.
expressing my feelings.
Yeah, and if that resonates with you, I always say you need to look deeper at what that is, because I forget where I read it, but there was like hundreds of different types of maybe even more. I don't know, but many different types of species in the alien races, right? So there's a lot we don't know. Some we have to research and look at. But I always say, how does that feel to you? How does that, resonate with you on a soul level?
Mhm. It's very interesting. We talked about this a little bit, but that first sign is that insatiable thirst for knowledge. You have that, Terri Ann.
I do. Well, I'm very curious in general, so I
Me
have a lot of variables, but I'm not Orion.
Well, I have that too. I'm constantly, Roz and I've talked about this. Like I hear about something I didn't know about, or I learn about something and I'm online Googling it. What is this? What does that mean? Um, and that started in childhood, but back then it was more about words. If I read all the time, and if I read a new word, I'd be researching, what does that word mean? Of course, you didn't have online then. I'm that old. But being a knowledge seeker, and I think having knowledge just makes them feel comfortable. Like they enjoy knowing a lot. And I don't think it's about like a know-it-all thing, but just like they enjoy having that knowledge with them.
Yeah, but
But
we
I
all
think
come
there are.
from
This
we're-
isn't me, but they love to impress others with what they know and conversations with logic. I mean, I don't want to get into that, but maybe in our modern world, those are the ones who love to go to trivia contests and bars and sweep the competition.
yeah.
Could
That's
be.
funny. Yeah. So, yeah, we hold all that knowledge. And I think sometimes as a human, then, right, our ego gets involved too. So you're like, well, I know it all. So you have a mixture of balance there. But that trivia one, that makes a lot of sense. I've come across a couple of people like that.
Yeah. If you ever watch the show The Office, I think of Oscar, the character Oscar, who's an accountant, because they call him actually because he inserts himself. Actually, the truth is, actually. Another sign is being a manifesting machine.
Mm.
Really good at it, like really good about transforming thoughts into physical manifestations, even if they seem impossible. Wow. We've mentioned this before, but we've had some pretty miraculous manifestations happen at Sedona Soul Sisters, just amongst the three of us. I mean, just bringing you into the practice, Terri Ann, and there's other things too, where we just talk about it and we do some joint manifestation, and boom, there it is.
Yeah, it's always mind blowing, isn't it? I found it so fascinating. Like, I was talking to my girlfriend the other day about how simple it really is. I don't want to get off subject, but how simple we make it so difficult when we manifest, but it's so simple.
Yeah, I
it
think
really
people
is.
try too hard. They're logicking their way through something that's not logical.
And they tell themselves, I think a lot of people start working on something and then they start working in their heads like all the reasons that it can't happen, it won't happen, you never can go there. You just can't go there. You have
So
to stay in that focus of it's already here.
Orion Starseed find that great balance between logical and spiritual. I think that's why manifesting becomes so easy for them. Another one is being drawn to be your own boss,
Mm.
the entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, I think it
fiercely
goes along with
independent,
freedom,
right?
doesn't it? It goes along with freedom. They're
Does.
inspired and they want their freedom to work for themselves and create new things because they are such great manifestors. So they're great, at thinking outside the box per se.
They are. They're just fiercely independent. And I think I just get the sense they struggle when they're confined to working for someone else. And I can understand that. Like, I didn't even realize I felt that way till I wasn't working for someone else anymore. And then I'm like, I don't ever want to go back to that. So valuing autonomy and, like you said, Terri Ann, the freedom, not being afraid of hard work. So they make excellent entrepreneurs. Makes sense. Those are great qualities for that.
I think another thing about them in relation to entrepreneurs, and I know we all feel the same way sometimes, we need a lot of downtime, a lot of alone time too. So again, you have all these aspects of your life. There are many different facets on the diamond, right? But as a spiritual person on a spiritual path and as an entrepreneur in your own business, you also need a lot of that downtime, that separation, because you are so sensitive and you're always working and researching. I know for me, it's about creating that balance a lot of times.
It definitely can be. I think another thing, you kind of touched on this a minute ago, was about being a compassionate activist and having a strong moral compass. Like those two things they can be in childhood. I think a starseed, Orion starseed, might show up as fiercely protecting the underdogs, really feeling drawn to that and not liking to see people being bullied, not only not liking it, who likes that other than bullies, but not tolerating it, feeling outraged. And because of their background that we talked about earlier, where they ended up leaving their own star system because of the Greys' treatment of them, they are fearful of Earth transforming into a place of energetic enslavement like their home constellation. So they feel this passion to do whatever it takes. They stand up for what they believe in. I think we're seeing a lot of that right now. And that you will, if you're Orion starseed, you're going to have from a very young age a very strong sense of right and wrong.
And look at why they're planted on the earth at this time specifically for what's going on right now.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. And today we talked about it a little bit earlier.
Even when my daughter was born, she had the deepest, bluest eyes. Not that ice blue color, but just a deep blue and just this knowing you can see. So too, if you have children out there and you think that they may be a starseed, you can look into that, because a lot of times they are very sensitive.
Oh yeah. This is kind of a tricky one because I don't know anybody who doesn't, but feeling mentally polarized at times. Is there anyone here who has never felt that way? Because gosh, I sure do. Overthinkers, overanalyzers, and I have to raise my hand. If you could see me, if my webcam was not on strike, you'd see me going, yep, that's me. And they can be found in their mind most of the times, and that can be a little tricky. So they have to require evidence before believing that a concept is true. And Orion starseeds rule with their logical mind. It's really a struggle to break out of that. And again, if you're too logical, you're blocking your own manifesting and many other things as well. So that's something just to be aware of about yourself. It's not bad. It's just is.
Yeah. And what I was talking about earlier with the degrees in their chart, it's specifically specific degrees in Gemini, which also Gemini has a lot of those qualities, very logical, analytical in their head a lot of times. So isn't that very interesting?
Yes, it is. It really is.
When you look at the natal chart and you see that that's in Gemini, and so Gemini and Orion have a lot of similar characteristics, it would make sense, right? If it was Orion in Aries, say, they'd be a whole different personality. So if it's in Gemini, which also has those qualities, I think it just makes it more accentuated.
That makes sense. Total sense. And so leading into that, like the next one's about being a perfectionist. And that's something I've really worked hard I can't say I completely overcome it, but maybe because I'm Virgo and I have this Orion starseed thing going. So it's like, but I do think like nothing's good enough. Like it's could be better. It could be better. It could be better. And I don't think that's a bad thing, to create something of quality, but I think when you get too into that, you're too hard on yourself and you can drive yourself nuts. And then you start comparing yourself to others and feeling like what you have done doesn't stand out enough. And all of these things that really perfectionism is an illusion. So you get it to a point where it's good, very good, but then you got to move on. Because I know I used to really get stuck in a rut where I was working so hard to perfect something, it never got done. And I think there's people out there who are going to go like, oh, yes, I recognize that.
And then you become self-critical, right? Because it's never perfect. It will never be perfect enough. So when you're a perfectionist, you really struggle with that. And it does take time to overcome that. I commend you for it. I think it's one of the hardest lessons that we have to learn when we're here is how to overcome being a perfectionist.
It is. Now I'm more like, get it to the best I can and then let it go. And then later I'm going to go, why did I not see that? Looks terrible. Let's fix that, but I'm not going to dwell on it. So another one is loving a good challenge. I think that's interesting one.
Does that resonate with you?
Yes. Here's a weird one I've always noticed about myself for a long time. There's been times in my life money was really tight. And on some level, I enjoyed that because it was a challenge to make the money go further to feed people in the house on such a little bit of money, and how far could I stretch it? How creative could I be with that? But I don't care to do that anymore. I just want to reinforce that with the universe that I no longer need that particular challenge and have released that. But thriving under pressure, and sometimes putting pressure on ourselves because we thrive under pressure. No task is too small to handle, even if you have a million other things going on. And I think those are the people who don't know how to say no. That's not me. People who just keep doing, taking things on. Maybe you belong to a social group and you're now in charge of 10 things and most people aren't doing one thing. Yeah. Seeking validation from yourself for doing all this. But they love pushing themselves to the limits. So it makes me think of athletes, really like professional athletes. Maybe that's part of what drives them. Here's another one, struggling to trust others and express yourselves. We kind of touched on that in that initial kind of talking about what the Orion star race is like, but this is about Starseed. And so similar to Pleiadian starseeds, you may struggle to keep your relationships here on Earth alive. Orion starseeds struggle because of their logical thinking. So emotions can be tricky for them to understand. I don't resonate with this one, but especially when they're thinking about other people's emotions, like they can't feel it. As an empath, that is definitely not a problem I have. But they never understand why someone makes a rash, impulsive decision based on a feeling. And that can cause friction in their relationships, whether it's friendship or love or work. Have you seen that with some of the people that you do starseed readings on, Terri Ann?
Definitely trust issues are a big one, and that can go into a variety of so many categories, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think a lot of us had trust issues from childhood or whatever lessons we came here to learn. And so it goes so deep. But those activated memories, that's how we know, especially when we do a past life regression and we're looking at that specifically. What is that trust issue about? Where does it come from? If it does come from another planet, another time, then obviously those memories that are within your cellular memory, that's something to look at. If you had nothing in childhood, nothing in past lives that would cause you to have those trust issues, and then we're taken into that environment where it's a off-planet experience, those memories are very activated within us. We just don't understand them.
You know what all this means, don't you? We know for sure that there are aliens because we are aliens.
They are us and they live among us and we are them.
You are them.
I was a child and I would say to everybody, like, we can't be the only ones here. And they're like, no, Terri Ann, Earth is the only one that has people on it.
I always thought that was ridiculous.
Me too. As a child in school, I'd like raise my hand in science class, like, you telling me we're the only ones here? Yes, Terri Ann, we're the only ones here. The Earth is flat, that kind of environment.
Mathematically, I think that's impossible. It just doesn't even make sense.
I know.
And here we are exhibiting another trait of Orion Starseed, being a practical person. Practicality comes first.
Absolutely.
You rule with your head and not with your heart when it comes to making serious life-changing decisions. And it's not about not being willing to take risk, but it's a calculated one, not an airy fairy. Let's see what kind of happens. That is so me. That is definitely me. Like I am really practical. So I don't know. It's kind of funny when people come to see us at Sedona Soul Sisters, especially the three of us. We are not airy fairy people. We are all very grounded and logical and
well, I don't know. I used to be very impulsive as an Aries. Like I would think about it, but I would jump and then look at the consequences later.
I had a husband who was an Aries. I understand.
I think
Absolutely.
if you're kind of going with that, okay, my theory is, oh, wait a minute, how does it feel? How does it feel? Does it feel right? Or can you feel that it's not going to work?
At the time, it always felt right when I was impulsive.
Roz, I don't think that's airy fairy. I think that's tuning into your intuition. That's tuning into your guides. And that's stopping and thinking and verifying. It's not just getting an idea and going, oh, let's do this. That's different.
True.
So, when you have the ability, when you've got good intuition, when you're in tune with your angels and guides, it makes total sense that you're going to ask for verification. Is this a good idea for me? Sometimes when I do that, I get a yes, sometimes a no, and sometimes that no is disappointing, but I know it's saving me. It's dodging a bullet because my little idea mind thinks, ooh, I'm going to do this, but they're like, no.
Like, are you sure? I really want to do this. No.
Yes. Totally. Totally. And you talked about this earlier. We should dive into this a little bit more, but that valuing your alone time. Crowds, socializing every day. I used to socialize every day. I've told you guys, before I moved to Sedona, my life in Prescott was I had dance class one night a week, one day a week. I had band practice one night a week. I had gigs on the weekends. I worked a full-time job in mental health. I sang with another group. I did Shakespearean acting with another group. I mean, there was something every night of the week that I was involved in. And sometimes I was in plays and musicals that's like a 4 to 6 week commitment of 5 nights a week. So that was just nothing to me. That's how I lived my life for decades. And when I stopped, it was a shock. It was a real shock. But now, like here doing the spiritual work full time, I need more and more alone time as the years go by to balance myself. So here's something interesting. They say, I looked this up and they're like, this is especially true for Orion Starseed about socializing in crowds. If they're going to something that they think is going to be boring or unengaging, well, who wants to go to something boring? But I really have a loathing of meetings. I call it meeting narcolepsy. And when I worked at a psychiatric hospital, there was some very hours-long meetings where we'd sit in a room in the inpatient unit and the psychiatrist would literally drone on, Jim Jones is an unfortunate young man who has schizophrenia. And it would just like that. And it would just drone on. And I would fall asleep in a sitting position and I would drop my pen on the tile floor. And the medical director would start laughing because it was inevitable, meeting narcolepsy. So I guess I have that issue. I don't like meetings. Another thing is not liking small talk. I really don't. And I'm sure there's others out there, but trivial matters can make you feel restless and irritated and just wanting to retreat from that kind of thing. And I think especially trivial matters like gossip. Ugh, that's
Yeah.
just
I
really.
would love to look at your natal chart and see where your degrees are and if they're in Gemini.
I have it. I'll bring it for you.
Okay.
And it's not about like minding to be around people. It's just sometimes you get a good energy boost around them, but you want your time alone. And I think you really need to recharge your batteries, Orion Starseed, and honor that. And if you feel like you need more time alone, get it. And you don't have to live alone to get that either. That goes right into being fiercely independent. We touched on that earlier too, but wow, that's a biggie, I think.
I think so. So you got a lot of it, right? Being fiercely independent, stuck in your head, trust issues.
Geez, sounds peachy, doesn't it? Oh, yeah.
You really came here to do your work.
Oh, goodness. It's about not liking unsolicited advice, but going to the people who have achieved what you want to achieve. Like you seek out advice from those you want it from. But I know that fiercely independent streak can really be intimidating to some people. And so it's possible to get strong criticism at some point for being fiercely independent. But for others, I think sometimes people feel intimidated because they want to be like that and they don't know how to get there, and it's foreign to them. But others, it inspires them to stand up for themselves, to stand up for what they believe in and try to pursue something more true to their higher self. And I know that we do that in our work, on our show, very much so, because people tell us all the time, so that's how we choose to use our fiercely independent nature at Sedona Soul Sisters. Here's one I think is interesting. Wishing others could understand you more. I can't say that that's not true of most people.
I would say so.
Yeah. I mean, what you're like, but others can misinterpret that, and it's really hurtful and hard, and you don't know how to fix that. And they could see you as cold or aloof, or the word I think you're going to hear the most often is reserved. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but you wish others could see through that, to see there's something more behind it. So maybe just a good thing to work on is exhibiting your compassionate side too.
Again,
So,
about that balance.
Yeah, the balance. And Terri Ann, do you know about that Mintakan? I hope I'm pronouncing it right. If I'm butchering it, to those of you out there, I apologize.
Yeah. So the Mintaka is like a water-based planet in there, and it has crystal clear waters. I'm reading from my Starseed Oracle cards here.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And so it's a water-based planet with, again, that blue, that really ice blue color, and that's what comes through with their eyes. But Mintaka, some natural traits that they have also is great potential, but it's all again about balancing out, coming to overcome what they came here to do.
The reason I bring it up is because they're a subrace of the Orion species. So I didn't want you to think we're suddenly going off on another topic, but this is a star system, a multiple star system, 1,200 light years from our sun. But they're considered to be the original light workers, here to teach us the value of potential. But there's some specific traits. If you're actually that subspecies, being drawn to the ocean and whales, dolphins particularly, love being near the water, very kind and nurturing, too flighty if their emotional self isn't grounded, and interested in careers involving water. So you might be that subspecies. And I don't want to run out of time. Let's talk about what are the kind of jobs that Orion starseeds tend to be drawn to, are really suited for, Terri Ann. Do you know anything about that?
Well, definitely entrepreneurs, self-employed. They're looking to work for themselves. Again, something in the science field. If you're drawn naturally to science and researchers, oh my God, if I had another career, it'd probably be a researcher.
You are a researcher. You write books. You have to be a researcher. Yeah. I think medicine too kind of makes sense. Mm-hmm. Computer science, law, banking, detective work, investigation and detective work is really research, a lot of it. Criminology is another one that just seems like it'd be a logical fit for them. Anything else you think people should know about the Orion Starseed, Terri Ann?
I don't know. It consists of such a vast atmosphere. So it's really hard to just pinpoint it to one thing. But I'd say if any of this resonates with you, is anything we talked about today, do your research and start looking. I mean, you'll love research anyway, right? So you might as well do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowledge is power. Remember that? Thank you for joining us today. If you have questions about today's show, you can email them to us at any time. That email is in the show description, no matter what platform you're viewing or listening on. We're happy to answer at any time. You've been watching the Sedona Soul Sisters show. If you'd like more information about us or our services, visit our website, sedonasoulsisters.com. Subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss a thing. And tune in next Friday when our topic is ethics of a reading. If you've never had a reading, I think it's a good idea to know what are some red flags and what are signs of an ethical reader. And we're going to bring up some topics within that you might not have even thought about. So for those of you out there who do readings and those of you who like readings or considering them, I think you're going to really enjoy this topic. We've never covered it before. So that's going to be fun. In the meantime, we hope you have an enlightening week.